Swiping and scrolling through social media. Is it an addiction? What impact could this have on our brain and mental well-being? Tune in to find out only here on the People Scientist podcast. You are listening to the People Scientist, the podcast dedicated to helping us optimize our health with the latest scientific findings on neuroscience, physiology, and nutrition. I, your host, Dr. Stephanie Caligiuri, a nutritionist, physiologist, and neuroscientist, will be here with you every single week, bringing us information to ignite our thinking, to help us be one step closer to the healthiest we can be. Hello, my People Scientist Army, and welcome back to the People Scientist podcast for episode 94, where every week I arm us with some scientific information so that we can all be a little bit smarter and healthier every week. How are you today? Wherever and whenever you are listening, I hope that you have an awesome day. It was only a few days ago that it was 2 years since publishing the very first episode on the People Scientist podcast. I think that's a great milestone. And if you can believe it, in about 6 weeks, we will hit 100 episodes. It's amazing to me that I've published that many episodes with that much content. You have all become a part of my normal routine now. You all motivate me to learn and discover new things. You challenge me to share complex science in a way that everyone can understand, and you all make me a better scientist. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being my motivation. Thank you for your feedback, your questions, and your messages. I really appreciate it when you reach out to me and let me know that you listen and what you think of the episodes. So without further ado, what am I going to share with us today? Well, I'm going to talk about the neuroscience of scrolling, the neuroscience of swiping, social media, smartphone use, and how that may impact our brain and mental well-being. Do you already have some thoughts on that? Well, by the end of this episode, I'm curious if your opinions on this will change. So as we always do, let's start off with some core takeaways. Social media like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, etc., they have been compared to gambling slot machines, compared to us being hypnotized and just mindlessly scrolling through rewarding content. Many people debate whether or not social media addiction exists. What do you think? And if so, what does this mean for our brain and our mental health? Well, many scientists have conducted studies and realized that social media use can be very reinforcing because it acts on certain brain regions that regulate pleasure and reward. However, at the same time, social media use may lead us to compare ourselves to others, which could lead to feelings of depression, anxiety, and specifically anxiety about our appearance and lifestyle. I also hypothesize in this episode that heavy social media use may reduce our attention control, meaning what we decide to give our attention to. As a result, this could increase our rumination on negative things. But I will give some suggestions on how we may potentially reverse that. So is heavy social media use problematic? I'd like to hear what you think by the end of this episode. So let's get into those interesting details now. So let's start off with the concept of social media addiction. Do you think we can actually develop an addiction or compulsive use of social media like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, etc.? Well, there is a set of criteria set out by the DSM-5 criteria to identify if an addiction exists. Typically, this is used in the context of a substance use disorder. But let's see if any of these criteria hold true for social media use. So number 1, do we use social media for longer than we want to? 2, do we want to decrease our use but can't seem to? 3, do we spend a lot of time obtaining, using, or recovering from social media use? 4, do we crave social media use? 5, are we not able to keep up with homework or school obligations because of social media? 6, do we continue to use social media even though it may cause issues with our relationships? 7, do we give up social, occupational, or recreational activities because of our social media use? 8, do we use social media even if it puts us in danger? 9, do we continue to use social media despite the physical or psychological effects? 10, do we need to use more social media as time goes on in order to get the same high or pleasure or reward? And lastly, number 11, do we develop feelings of withdrawal when we reduce or eliminate our use, and that can be relieved by going back on social media? So yes, unfortunately, I think a lot of these criteria that we use to identify a drug addiction are also applicable to compulsive social media use too. These are the exact same questions that are used for drug addiction, but instead of social media, the word social media is just replaced with drug. Social media has been compared to gambling slot machines, in that bright flashing colors, sounds, and constant stimulation can be a very reinforcing thing for us. So when we view social media, what is going on in our brain? Well, Sherman in the journal Psychological Science in 2016 conducted a really interesting study in teenagers. The scientists showed teenagers different photos on social media and observed whether the teenagers would click to like the photo or not, and whether or not they kept scrolling. At the same time, the scientists used functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, to study the blood flow in the brain, and this would give us an insight into different brain region recruitment while the teenagers looked at social media photos. So what do you think the scientists noted? Well, the teenagers tended to like photos that already had a lot of likes, and were hesitant to like photos with less likes. The scientists interpreted this as peer influence, that if others liked it, it was safe or acceptable to like it too. The scientists also noted that when the teenagers viewed and liked these photos, there was more activity in certain brain regions like the visual cortex of the brain. So the visual cortex of our brain is certainly involved in our viewing of social media. But what was really interesting was that the teenagers participating all submitted their own photos to this experiment. And when they saw their own photo on social media with many likes, many brain regions were recruited. Can you guess which brain regions those were? They were primarily brain regions involved in reward, pleasure, and motivation, like the nucleus accumbens, the caudate putamen, thalamus, the ventral tegmental area, and the brainstem. These are the same brain regions recruited during other pleasurable things like listening to music, exercise, when we consume sources of caffeine like coffee, sugar, and drug intake as well. So viewing photos on social media can be very reinforcing, especially when viewing likes of your own content. So this is one of the studies that was used to support the notion that yes, social media may lead to an addiction because it acts on the same brain regions that drugs do. But this brings up the topic of the brain reward pathway, pleasure, and the reinforcing nature of social media. As social media can contain many things like music, dancing, photos, art, cute animals, comedy, etc. For example, photos or videos of people are most common on social media. And Jacobson in 2006 confirmed that symmetry is an important part of perceived beauty and the ability to activate certain brain regions when viewing beautiful imagery. One study by Platek in 2010 investigated men viewing images of women's bodies and indicated that a waist-to-hip ratio of around 0.7 activated the brain reward pathway of men most significantly versus women that had a lower or higher waist-to-hip ratio. Similarly, women rated a higher shoulder-to-hip ratio in men as more attractive. So viewing images or videos of people with quote-unquote attractive bodies in itself is reinforcing and rewarding. But social media doesn't contain just photos or videos of people. It contains other things too, like music, which we know through fMRI studies can activate our brain reward pathway and release dopamine too. We know that bright colors can. Comedy, cute animals giving the awe effect. So all of these things can contribute to us wanting to continue scrolling or swiping through social media. And I mean, I love that type of content too. I fall prey to it as well. So the question then is that such a bad thing? Well, Lynn in the journal Depression and Anxiety in 2016 reported in a sample population of over 1,700 people, if participants spent more than 2 hours on their smartphone per day, they were 66% more likely to have symptoms of depression versus those who use their smartphone for 30 minutes or less per day. So what does this mean? Well, 28.6% of people who were deemed as higher users of their smartphone reported symptoms of depression versus only 21.8% in the low users group. So this study does not show causation, meaning it does not tell us if smartphone use causes depression or vice versa if depression increases smartphone use. It just shows a correlation. So is there more to it than this? Well, social media has been implicated as a culprit for social comparison. For example, comparing yourself to others. This can be in regard to us comparing our lifestyle, our opportunities, and our appearance to others. Hawes in the journal Body Image in 2020 conducted a study to understand how social media use may influence how we compare ourselves to others on social media and how that makes us feel. The scientists recruited 763 teenagers and young adults. The participants were asked to report their time spent on social media and answered questions about their preoccupation with both general and appearance-related comparisons. The scientists also assessed symptoms of depression, social anxiety, and anxiety about one's physical appearance. The scientists noted that social media use was associated with symptoms of depression, social anxiety, and appearance anxiety, meaning that the more someone used social media, the higher the scores they had for how anxious they felt about their appearance, and had higher scores of symptoms of depression and general anxiety. Younger women tended to have higher scores and to be influenced more so by social media. However, young men also were influenced by social media in regard to their feelings of depression, anxiety, and appearance-related anxiety. You see, it can be very difficult for us to view social media without comparing ourselves to what we see. But the more we do that, the more we compare ourselves to what we see, it seems the less happy we will be. And of course, how social media does not always depict reality. We may be comparing ourselves to something that is not real, to something that is not achievable. So the scientists in this study report that social media may lead to comparison anxiety, that we compare ourselves constantly to what we see. But if we can safeguard ourselves from this, attempting to not compare ourselves to others, this could be a useful strategy when being on social media. Olson in the journal Frontiers in Psychology last year conducted a study in 641 students to understand if their smartphone use was associated with their ability to be hypnotized. This was two interesting things to look at together. So why was their ability to be hypnotized looked at? Well, the scientists speculate that being hypnotized can be very similar to heavy social media use, meaning hypnosis and heavy smartphone or social media use are both characterized by absorbed states in which we may lose track of time and we just become automatic in our responses to what we see. So the scientists repeatedly attempted to hypnotize the students. And I mean, at first I was like, wait, is hypnosis real? And what do you think? But by the definition of the American Psychological Association, they define hypnosis as a state of consciousness with involved focused attention and reduced peripheral awareness, characterized by an enhanced capacity for response to suggestion. So, I mean, if we go by that definition, then yes, I think hypnosis could be real. And I think that would be an interesting episode unto itself, yeah? So anyways, in this study, they had the students go through several rounds of hypnosis to see who was easily hypnotized, who'd go into this trance state, versus who wasn't. Then the students had to fill out a questionnaire about their social media use and smartphone use, and how addicted they felt to their phone. The scientists noted a weak but still significant association that those who were more easily hypnotized also tended to report more feelings of smartphone or social media addiction. The scientists conclude that this could lead to problematic smartphone use, that people may go into a trance of sorts, a hypnosis of sorts, and compulsively consume social media without full consciousness or awareness of what they're doing. So why is this a problem? Well, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, more or heavy social media use seems to be associated with more feelings of depression, anxiety, and anxiety about one's appearance. I'm also curious if social media use can influence our attention control. I spoke about attention control back in episode 71 when I talked about the neuroscience of meditation. And that is actually one of my favorite episodes all about meditation. I think it's a really fascinating topic. So one of the key features of meditation is that it helps strengthen our attention control, meaning what we give our attention to. Many times we may focus on negative things. We may ruminate, and that can negatively impact our mental well-being. In fact, ruminating on negativity is a hallmark symptom of depression. Well, meditation aims to help give us control to what we give our attention to. And I hypothesize that increased social media use may reduce our attention control. On social media, we are fed different content constantly. We may allow our more primitive brain regions involved in reward and pleasure to take over, and therefore tend to view content that makes us feel happy, content that activates our brain reward pathway that releases dopamine, meaning we may not be using our higher order brain regions involved in decision making, planning, thinking, etc. This is in part why social media may be reinforcing or somewhat addictive. But it may also reduce our ability to control what we give our attention to, leading to an increased likelihood for ruminating on negative things. Satani in 2018 reported that in young adults with diagnosed ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, that they reported higher scores of social media addiction. Again, this is just correlation, but reduced attention control with higher social media use may be a potential reason contributing to symptoms of depression and anxiety. But can meditation help in this capacity? It might. For example, in a study in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience 2012, scientists compared brain region activity between those with great meditation experience versus those without. Participants with meditation experience exhibited greater connections for networks in the brain controlling attention, like the medial prefrontal cortex of the brain. These regions of the brain appear to be more important for cognitive skills such as attention span and in disengaging from distractions. Now, meditation doesn't come easy to everyone. Personally, I struggle to do it every day, but I do find a slow improvement and progression in my attention control. Do you like to meditate? And do you find that it helps you? I'd love to hear. I go into details about this, but the neuroscience of meditation in episode 71, if you want to tune in and understand how meditation may improve our mental well-being and our attention control. So that is a wrap, my people scientist army, the influence of scrolling and swiping through social media on our brain and mental well-being. So, is social media so bad? Well, that is up to you. Some people may be more easily influenced by social media. If one notices that they tend to compare themselves to what they see on social media, and if they have increased feelings of depression and anxiety because of it, then reducing intake of social media or choosing what you look at may be of benefit. But social media is made to be reinforcing by having content of beautiful imagery, music, comedy, cute animals, etc. We know that viewing content on social media, or viewing that we have likes for our own content, can activate brain regions in our brain reward pathway like the nucleus accumbens, the caudate putamen, and the ventral tegmental area. And this can lead to increased levels of dopamine and contribute to us feeling happy. So if our social media use doesn't seem to be problematic, meaning if it's not negatively interfering with our life, then it may not be so bad. But that's up to you to decide. I would love to hear what you think about this topic. I hope that it was interesting and thought-provoking for you. I hope that you all have a wonderful and healthy week. If you want to say hi to me, if you want to ask me a question, or buy me a coffee to say thanks for the episode, the information on how to do all of that is in the description box to this episode. I hope that you all have an awesome week, and I look forward to meeting you back here for another episode, the same time and same place on the People Scientist podcast. Bye for now. I am a scientist simply sharing scientific evidence. Some of the clinical interventions I discuss are not appropriate for everyone. Before making any changes to your diet or lifestyle, please do consult the advice of your physician or dietitian. My opinions expressed here do not necessarily reflect those of Mount Sinai Hospital and its affiliates.